We all know about whiskies aged in Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez casks. This has been aged in Fino Sherry casks, which is incredibly different to other forms of sherry. Hey there, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. Taste is subjective, whiskey is diverse, and this channel is all about understanding it well enough to enjoy it on your own terms. So let's just get into it. Last year, I was fortunate enough to try a few early samples of whiskey from Laizhou Distillery before it had actually hit the Australian market, and I was really impressed with the quality of the whiskey, especially considering it was coming from a new distillery in a country that's not known for making whiskey. Laizhou Distillery is situated in China, and they first started laying down barrels of single malt in 2021. And like Australia, they enjoy a hot, humid climate that allows their whiskey to sort of age and take on characters from the barrel a lot faster than they do in places like Scotland. If you want to check out that early review, you can check that one out here, but I've got a few more Laizhou whiskies to taste and try now, including the Fino Sherry Cask. Now, Fino Sherry is new to me. I actually had to look this up. It's a Spanish style of sherry that's considered pale, incredibly dry, made from Palomino grapes. And it's meant to be served chilled and has flavors of almonds, fresh dough, and like a faint herbal note, which pairs really, really well with salty foods. That's what the sherry is like. So let's try a whiskey aged in that type of sherry cask. It's a non-age statement, no color added. It's bottled at 46%. It retails here in Australia for $135. Nice dark amber with a bit of, there's almost like a little bit of a reddish hue going on in there. I really hope the legs on this comes up on the camera there, because that is really, really thick legs. You can see that here. Now on the nose, there's a wonderful thick, almost like a caramelized jam going on in there. It's kind of, it's a little bit plummy. There's a bit of like this raisin sort of note, but there's a little bit of ripe apple going on as well. And there's a bit of an underlying wood sort of note. It's coming across more like maybe cedar. Yeah, it's a bit aromatic, so it's a little bit more like cedar. But just that thick, those caramelized sugars that are going on in there is really, really enticing. So I've got to have a sip. Normally on this channel I say slange because I drink a lot of Scottish whiskey, but today we'll say gumbe. I did mention that Fino Sherry is considered to be quite a dry type of sherry, and that's the first impression you get off this. You take a sip and it's almost like there hasn't even been liquid going into your mouth. It is so dry that you almost don't even feel it on the tongue. You just get the flavor and that warming sensation that comes across from the whiskey.
Dry enough for you? Here's my dry enough.
But in spite of how dry it is, there's quite a lot of sweetness that comes across. It's like an earthy sweetness, but at the same time, it's sort of, you've got this caramelized brown sugar sort of thing happening in there. There are some sort of fruit notes. The plumminess that was on the nose is a little bit more raisin-like on the palate itself. But you've got like, there's a lot of this sweetness that you're having to get past to be able to pick out some of those other notes. And because of that syrupy nature of the sweetness, the finish just sticks around for such a long time. I still can't get over the fact that this is ultimately, because they started laying down barrels in 2021, this was released just last year, I believe. So it's probably only about 4 years of age, that's a beautiful whiskey. And to have that level of finish as well, and everything is so nicely balanced. The distillery is quite huge. I think I actually just heard that last week they laid down their 600,000th barrel since they started making whiskey. If you're producing on a global scale and you've got a lot more barrels to work with when you're vatting everything to be able to make a release, yeah, it gives you that opportunity to be able to produce a much higher quality because you can play around with what is going into it. You're not restricted to just like the 4 or 5 barrels that you've got to work with. And that really shows because this is just the balance of all the flavors that are on there and just how wonderfully long that finish is on this one. I'm genuinely impressed every single time I try one of these whiskies. But the unique thing for me on this one is that dry palate. It's remarkable how much of that comes across from those sherry barrels. There's actually, now that I come back to this again, there's actually like a little bit of like a leathery sort of leather or tobacco note there hanging around in the finish at the back of the palate. Yeah, I'd say that the main takeaways I have on this is this caramelized sweetness, leather, tobacco, and just the dryness of that on the palate. If you like these sorts of reviews where it's my insights on the whiskey and like a bit of background on the distillery itself, hit the subscribe button. This is the sort of thing I do every single week. But if we're going to compare this to the notes that the distillery provides, they say that on the nose you get cinnamon and cedar, raisins, salted plum, brown sugar, toasted nuts, and jujube. Jujube, if you haven't heard of it, is a Chinese, it's like a red date. I've never actually had jujube before. But yeah, there's a little, with that raisin sort of sweetness, there's a little bit of that date sort of thing happening around there as well. The palate, caramel, licorice, woody spices. I don't really get licorice. Personally, I don't like licorice. I don't get a licorice note on this, but there's something sort of hovering around on the palate that I can understand how you would get licorice from it. It's this sweetness, but it's maybe a teeny bit burnt. There's something else there. Yeah, I think if you had a positive impression of licorice, you might pull a licorice flavor out of this. I'm not pulling the negative aspects of licorice out of this, thankfully. So I wouldn't agree with that note. And then the finish, there's meant to be woody notes and licorice on the finish. Thankfully, again, I don't get the licorice on the finish, but yeah. Just this sweetness, leather, almost tobacco on the finish that's carrying across. But that is a really, really nice whiskey, especially for a non-age statement at 135. Like, by Australia's pricing, that's really, really good. Yeah. Oh. I think we've got I think this is the Australian language label over. Yeah. That's just the Australian language label going over the Chinese label. I can't read Chinese, so I'm not going to get any more information by pulling that off. But yeah, my impression of Laizhou just keeps improving with every single one of their whiskies that I taste. So I've got a couple more that I'm going to do in the next couple of tastings, so stick around for those. Again, hit the subscribe button if you want to catch those ones. But this is actually the only whiskey that I've had from China. Without getting political, I have had whiskies from Kavalan, not China, that's Taiwan. Let's not go there. But if you had any other whiskies from China that's actually genuinely impressed you, that's far better than what you were expecting, because now I don't know, has Laizhou set the bar really, really high for me? And now if I try any other Chinese whiskies, am I going to be disappointed? Or is this sort of the level that they're going for? I'm really keen to try more from China now. As a new world whiskey producer, it seems really, really interesting and really, really exciting. So let me know in the comments if you've got any other Chinese whiskies you'd recommend. Stick around if you want to see a few more of these Laizhou whiskey tastings, and come back.